Looking ahead to the college football slate that's in front of us with the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. First up on the list is number 10, Miami against number 2, Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. And the winner of this game will face the winner of Ole Miss and Georgia in the Fiesta Bowl next round. Now, for Ohio State, this is their third straight Cotton Bowl appearance, fun fact. And the first one they won against Texas. That was a playoff game. But then the year before that, it was a loss to Missouri where Kyle McCord, their quarterback, had transferred and Marvin Harrison Jr. had opted out of that game. And that also wasn't in the playoff format rotation that year. So it really wasn't a meaningful game for them as a program, but they did lose that game to Missouri in 2022. And this is a team where the current playoff format is ridiculous in my opinion because Ohio State has not played a football game in 3.5 weeks. And their last game was the Big Ten championship game against Indiana, which they did lose that one. But they are the defending champs from last year against Notre Dame, where they beat them in the national championship. And they are looking to go back-to-back this year and secure their 7th national title in program history. And then for Miami, of course, you have Carson Beck, who has been on this stage before, albeit not as a starter. He was a 2-time champion. He was part of the Georgia back-to-back year in 2021 and 2022, but he was the backup to Stetson Bennett at the time. And then for Ohio State, you also have quarterback Julian Sayin, who won with Ohio State last year, but again, not as a starter. He was backing up Will Howard, their quarterback last season. So both of these quarterbacks are looking to win a title as a starter. And that's something that they will both be very, very hungry to do, I'm sure. For Miami, this is their college football playoff debut, regardless of 12 or 4 teams, and they looked pretty stout against Texas A&M. They won 10-7 in a just defensive battle that was down to the wire, essentially, where Miami ended up winning with a field goal, and that secured the deal for them. And historically speaking, on the national championship stage, their last win was back in 2001 with that legendary Miami Hurricanes team. But in that game against Texas A&M, their defense was very, very good, but offensively, they really couldn't get a whole lot done. They were outgained offensively. They also had 9 fewer first downs than Texas A&M, and they only converted about 25% of their third down opportunities. So they really got to clean some things up offensively if they want any shot of beating Ohio State. But on the ground, that was one of the few bright spots for them offensively because they averaged 6.3 yards per carry rushing, and their defense, like I mentioned, also forced 3 turnovers. Now, Texas A&M, they're a much more turnover-prone team than Ohio State because Ohio State this season is only averaging 0.7 turnovers per game, which is good for 4th in the country. So they are not going to make a lot of mistakes. Julian Sayin is not going to turn the ball over. I don't expect him to, at least, but Miami's pass rush is pretty lethal. It's probably the best in the country. But their running game, I think if they can get that going, they'll have a shot because running back Mark Fletcher Jr. was a beast in that game against Texas A&M. He averaged 10 yards per carry in that game and accounted for 172 of Miami's total 278 yards of offense. So they really got to get other things working in the passing game so they don't rely solely on him, especially if they find themselves down and have to play catch-up. They're going to have to look to pass the ball and get that going. But it'll be interesting to see how Fletcher does against Ohio State's run defense because statistically speaking, Ohio State ranks 5th in rushing yards per game allowed, 6th in yards per carry allowed, and they are also 1st in both scoring and total defense. So that's going to be a brick wall that Fletcher will have to run into, but I think he can get some things going. But it just depends on how the game goes for them. Again, if they find themselves down, they might have to abandon the run. Who knows? But Miami's pass rush, as I mentioned, they are the best in the country. They also rank top 12 in yards per play allowed, scoring, and total defense. But I will say they did struggle against some competent offenses like Louisville and SMU. So that's a little bit of cause for concern here, but they did hold their own, like I said, against Texas A&M, who was undefeated until their loss against Texas. And the fact that they pretty much stymied them to 7 points was pretty remarkable to see. So they are capable of doing so. But their offensive line is also very, very good at protecting Carson Beck, their quarterback. They rank second in pass blocking. And Ohio State, it's going to be very interesting to see how they attack that, because Ohio State's offense will probably be the best offense that Miami will face this year. But they are also outside the top 15 in scoring and total offense because of Ohio State's slower pace of play when it comes to running plays and moving the ball. And if you look back at the Big Ten championship game against Indiana, Julian Sand was sacked 5 times on 12 pressures in that game. So I think if Miami's pass rush can get to him, they do have a shot in that game. I mean, Indiana just proved that, right? If you can get to Sand and hold them to a low total, you'll be in the game at least. Maybe not win, but you'll be competitive throughout the entire game. But that being said, if you're weighing both of these teams, if you're looking at all aspects, I think Ohio State is the more complete team, but I think that Miami has the better pass rush and special teams. The spread right now, last I checked, is about 9 or 9.5. Ohio State is a 9-point favorite in this game. It's going to be a very, very tough call. I think 9 points might be a little bit too much. If it was closer to like 6.5, I think that Ohio State covers this. But I think Miami's pass rush is enough to at least keep them within 2 scores. But we'll see what happens. Again, this game makes me really nervous because it's really hard. 9 is a very weird number. I don't know if Ohio State can definitively beat them. I think this is going to be a very low-scoring game, a defensive battle at the end of the day, and that's usually not the case when somebody is winning by 2 scores. So the spread might be a little bit too much for my taste. But looking ahead to the next matchup of the day in the Orange Bowl, we have Oregon taking on Texas Tech. Now, this one is probably my favorite matchup of the quarterfinals because it is the closest spread in terms of the favorite. Oregon is a slight 2.5-point favorite, so I think it could very much go down to the wire in this one. And the winner of this will face the winner of the previous game, the winner of this game will face Indiana or Alabama, the winner of that game in the Peach Bowl next round. And Texas Tech is also a team that has been off for the past 3.5 weeks after their Big 12 championship game win against BYU, where they absolutely dominated in that one. Whereas Oregon is coming off of a first-round win against James Madison, where they won 51-34. Now, that 34 is pretty concerning to me, at least. I know a lot of that really didn't matter in the end, where the game was pretty much already wrapped up. But the fact that they still allowed 30-plus points to James Madison, it makes me a little worried for Oregon, I'm not going to lie. Even though they do have the better quarterback in Dante Moore, and he only has 8 interceptions on the season, but 2 of those came against James Madison. So again, another slight cause for concern if I'm an Oregon fan. Texas Tech, on the other hand, their quarterback, Baron Morton, has thrown for over 2,600 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, and just 4 interceptions. And his volume this year, if you look at his stats last year, it is a lot lower. And that is largely due to the emergence of running back Cameron Dickey, who has ran for over almost 1,100 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns on 5.5 yards per carry. So they have been really balanced offensively all season, but their defense is the main driving factor in this one. And if you look at that guy right there, Jacob Rodriguez, their linebacker, he's probably the best defensive player in the country. He has been no one to mess with all season. He has been a beast, a man among boys. It has just been not even close. Like, he is an All-American linebacker. He leads the team with 117 tackles. He also has 7 forced fumbles and 4 interceptions. So he has been doing it all for the Red Raiders defense. And this is going to be someone to watch against an Oregon offense who has been pretty elite all season. Their running backs, especially on the ground, or all Oregon's main running backs, all average at least 6.6 yards per carry. And Texas Tech, largely thanks to Rodriguez has the best run defense. So that is going to be pretty interesting matchup to see. That's going to be the one to watch, if any. But Texas Tech, offensively, especially in the red zone, they've had their struggles. They're going to need to score touchdowns instead of field goals in this one if they want to beat Oregon. I don't doubt that Texas Tech's defense will come to play. I'm just a little bit worried about their offense if they can keep up with Oregon's super-powered offense and match them scoring. But I think this one could go down to the wire for sure. I think that Oregon does have a slight advantage. Like I said, they have the better offense, but Texas Tech's defense, man, it's so hard to pick against them, and defense wins championships. So if I had to pick, I guess I would go with Oregon, but not so much on the spread. I would take them straight up to win the game. 2.5 is just, it's a little too close for comfort in my opinion. But I think that if Texas Tech can at least be competent offensively and keep up with Oregon, I think they do come away with a win here. But looking ahead to Alabama versus Indiana, the Big Ten undefeated Indiana, 13-0 this season. They just had the Heisman winner in quarterback Fernando Mendoza. So they are absolutely rolling, but they have also been off for a significant amount of time. And this is the Rose Bowl, or the granddaddy of them all. This is the one that is the biggest one each year. And the winner of this one will face the winner of Oregon and Texas Tech in the Peach Bowl. Now, this is actually Indiana's first appearance in the Rose Bowl since 1968. So it's been a long time coming for them to return to Pasadena, California. And Indiana also made the college football playoff last year, but they did lose in the first round to Notre Dame 27-17 in that one. Whereas Alabama, they've been here before. We all know this. This is their 9th college football playoff appearance. It's actually their 9th Rose Bowl appearance in program history. But this is their first playoff appearance under head coach Kalen DeBoer, and he has been the talk of the town essentially for Alabama fans. If he's on the hot seat, if he should stay, if he's not lived up to par when it comes to coming after Nick Saban, who is probably the greatest college football coach, arguably one of the best coaches, period, in sports history at Alabama. And, a loss here could put him on the hot seat for definitively, and he might be run out of town by Alabama fans when it's all said and done. But the last time Alabama played, they came back down 17 points to Oklahoma in a crazy game that I thought was over from the first quarter, essentially, because Oklahoma looked so dominant in that one, and then they let Alabama come all the way back and win that one. That was mind-boggling to me. But for Indiana, like I said, they have the Heisman winner in Mendoza, who has completed over 71% of his passes for nearly 3,000 yards and set a school record with 33 passing touchdowns and just 6 interceptions. So he has been pretty remarkable this season. And then for Alabama, you also have decent quarterback play with Ty Simpson, who has thrown for 3,500 yards, 28 touchdowns, and just 5 interceptions. But Alabama's running game is pretty bad, if we're being honest. I mean, they're averaging just under 110 rushing yards per game, which is good for just 118th nationally, which is pretty bad, like I said. And that is going to be a problem for them if they don't try to clean that up, especially against Indiana defense that ranks 4th in the nation, only giving up 257 yards per game. And they also rank 6th in sacks with 39 sacks on the season. So they're really going to have to protect Ty Simpson, especially if the ground game isn't working, which it really hasn't for them all season. They're really going to have to rely on that passing attack and to keep him upright and give him time in the pocket against a ferocious Indiana pass defense. And Indiana's offense, on the other hand, is also pretty good. They're not just a defensive team. They rank 8th in total offense with 472.8 yards per game. And they also rank 10th in rushing yards per game with 221 rushing yards per game. So they are very, very balanced on the ground. And that is where they will get you. They play old school football. They love to attack on the ground and run the dang ball. And that is probably what they'll end up doing against Alabama. But it's going to be a tough test for them because Alabama's defense ranks 13th in total defense, giving up 289 yards per game. And they are also the 28th ranked rushing defense, giving up 120 rushing yards per game. And when it comes to passing, if they have to force Mendoza to pass, they rank 10th in pass defense, giving up just 168 passing yards per game. So it's going to be a tough test for Indiana. I think they can do it, especially considering that Indiana is first in the country in rushing success rate. Like I said, they are 10th in rushing yards per game, so they are very, very efficient on the ground. And Alabama, on the other hand, their defense, as good as I said they were, they are just 113th in broken tackles allowed. So I think it's going to be a long day for Alabama's defense. I love Indiana in this spot. They are favored by 6.5. It's just a sweet spot for me where they win by at least a touchdown, and I like to back them to do so against Alabama and advance to the semis. But looking to the last game of the day, we have number 6 Ole Miss versus number 3 Georgia in a rematch of a previous matchup from October in the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. And the winner of this one will face the winner of Miami and Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl. And like I said, this is a rematch of a previous edition of these two teams where Ole Miss, that was their only loss of the season. They were 12-1 on the year, and they lost 43-35 to Georgia earlier this season. And that game was pretty wild if you remember watching it, because Ole Miss started out red hot. They scored a touchdown on 5 straight possessions to open up the game, but then they stalled pretty much in the fourth quarter where they put up a giant donut in scoring in the fourth quarter, and their only points came in the first 3 quarters, so they really need to finish the game if they want to have any chance against Georgia, especially with all the losses. Like, you lose Lane Kiffin, their head coach. You now have Pete Golding who is their defensive coordinator, who got promoted to their head coach now. So he's expected to lead them. He did have his debut coaching appearance against Tulane, where they pretty much dominated Tulane 41-10. I also found out that Golding is from Hammond, Louisiana, which is on the north shore of New Orleans, and it's going to be sort of a homecoming game for him in the Dome in the Sugar Bowl. But like I said, Ole Miss, they're 35 points against Georgia, albeit only in the first 3 quarters. That was the most that any team put up on the Bulldogs all season long. But Georgia's defense is really, really honed in these last 4 games that they played. They're averaging just 7.25 points per game allowed in those 4 games. They've been pretty stout as of late. And not to mention, in that game, too, they also put up 43 points on offense. And that was largely thanks to Gunnar Stockton, who threw for almost 300 yards and 4 passing touchdowns. And they also ran for 221 rushing yards as a team compared to Ole Miss's 88. Now, Ole Miss might have the best running back in the country in Kawan Lacey, and he ranks 8th in rushing yards in the country with over 1,300 rushing yards. But in that game against Georgia, he only ran for 31 yards on 12 carries. So that is not efficient at all. They really need to get him going if they want any chance of winning this game. But Georgia, in terms of red zone offense, they are among the best in the country. They rank 2nd in red zone touchdown rate, where they've scored a touchdown in 35 of 40 red zone trips all season. So super efficient there. It's pretty much a guarantee that they get 7 anytime they get inside the 20. And their defense, they have been bringing a lot more pressure. They have been a lot better at tackling since that last game against Ole Miss, where they did give up all those points. But the spread, again, here is 6.5. Georgia is favored. I do like them to cover that, especially given the coaching experience with Kirby Smart. Again, they went back-to-back just a few years back. They've been here before. They had that playoff experience. And Ole Miss, even though they really haven't missed a beat without Lane Kiffin, it's still kind of a significant blow to them. And he was a huge reason for their success all year. So I like the Bulldogs to win this one.